I'd love to segue into these necessary conditions, these vital conditions, and how those connect with the other beautiful set of language, Gary, that you offer us around agency and coherence and hope and blessing. And so I'd love you to say more about those leading causes of life and how they connect to the vital conditions.
So the important thing to say about the vital conditions is they don't exhaust the list of what needs to be done.
Sure.
But they make sure you don't leave out really key things. So there would be, if you looked at the graphic, there's 7. No, there were 17. No, there's nobody in the community who's not part of what needs to be done.
Exactly.
And so it's an invitation to the complex ecology out of which human thriving comes. But at the very core, it's the meaning and belonging that's there. And there's an apparatus, there's methodology, there's ways you can do that better or worse, informed by greater wisdom, or you can make it up and leave out all sorts of stuff. It's the vital conditions are linked, and of course you'll see not leading cause of life didn't invent vital conditions, but the logic of leading causes of life is the same basic logic, that the muscles, the civic muscle that is there to be released doesn't have to be given to anybody. It's already there. It's what we are born for. So the logic underneath the leading causes of life, to keep it from being in any way exclusive for any this or that part of community, is to understand what's spirit. And at the root, here I honor our teacher, Dr. Jim Cochran, who, when the South African government heard about this body of work, and they basically said, so you're telling me we can go into the most violent townships in Cape Town and into the lives of the young men who are most implicated and captured in these patterns of violence, that there's spirit there, that there's religious health assets, there's leading cause of life there? Is that what you're telling us? And so we said yes, and we cross-tested it, identical logic in Memphis and township Regeville in Cape Town, and so used it as a research methodology. But in order to go that deep into the logic, you really need to release the hold on spirituality and go deeper than the westernized, sort of silly, superficial language. And Jim and Doug McGahee dug into that and understood that what we think of as spirit, the real core of what's going on in meaning belonging, it takes the African understanding of energy, in which every single human being has this vital, throbbing energy that makes them human, long before it distills into any creed or idea. It's the sort of the raw energy of capacity. And Kant's understanding of creative freedom, what makes us human, is our human capacity to imagine freely. And that's also what demands that we be moral. And so you take energy, creative imagination, those could be captured for evil. If they are not accountable, that they must be for the good of the whole. And so there's this deep taproot into spirit that also taps deeply into moral.
Can I offer us a slightly different way?
I hope so.
That I as a great, who've been privileged to be part of the Leading Causes of Life initiative, and one of the people who got to have a front row seat as communities, actually thousands of communities gave their input to create the vital conditions. In fact, I remember being there when a Jill Van Lanen, a school teacher in Wisconsin, said, oh, that belonging civic muscle needs to be at the heart. That's, I think, there are many frameworks of determinants, but that's what made it go. So to me, the vital can be the most important, but vital is actually life, right? It gets to first question. But you think about vital statistics, et cetera, and where we started, what creates the conditions for life? And if you think about belonging and civic muscle, what creates the conditions for belonging is, of course, the condition of love, relationship, how we know each other, how we know we're bound to be with one another, to be interconnected, how we frame what belonging means and who can say it, some of what you were speaking about. But that civic muscle, in this country, we've tended to think of that as being about elections and voting. But actually, that's not what civic muscle is at all in the way we think about what creates life. It's the kind of weaving together in trustworthy process. It's agreements we make together in our social contract with one another. That kind of civic muscle requires people to be using the leading causes of life, not as nouns, but nouns,
yes.
but as verbs. How do we practice agency and coherence? Like all of the pieces of that, all of that is required for a new way of being and doing that enacts communities in which truly unleash the conditions that are necessary for life. And I think the other piece of that is we have to have some radical honesty